Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology, and first daily Mormon history podcast. I'm Rick Bennett. I'm excited to continue our conversation with Bob Roylance. He's the author of the Yucatan Peninsula theory of the Book of Mormon. So we'll continue our conversation. We're going to talk about his model and how it compares with South American models. Also, we're going to talk about geology and metals. So you won't want to miss this conversation. Check it out. Well, since you're an agriculture guy, you didn't go to Utah State, did you, by the way?
No. BYU.
You went to BYU. Okay. The reason why I asked that, I know the South America, have you followed the South America Book of Mormon theory very closely?
Not closely. I've just kind of glanced at it.
One of their big things is, Nephi grew up in a Mediterranean climate, and it says that they took seeds with them, and that when they got to the Promised Land, wherever that is, the seeds grew. And so South American proponents say, and Baja to some extent, say that those two areas are a Mediterranean climate. Would you consider the Yucatan Peninsula a Mediterranean climate as well?
Pretty close.
Pretty close? And so they
the equator goes into Kenya. It's north. Through, probably through Southern Sahara Desert. So, yeah, Mediterranean, yeah.
Okay.
Maybe more so. Yeah, it's Mediterranean. But corn or maize is the big deal in Central America.
And it's funny because the Book of Mormon doesn't really mention corn that much, does it? Or does it?
No.
And so, because barley and wheat is what it mentions, but those were not really common in the Yucatan, were they? Or were they?
No.
They weren't.
They grow it, but it's not like corn.
Corn is everything.
There's a lot of tradition about the corn. A lot of sacred. When we planted our corn there, we had to have it, the seeds, we had to bring it in early, and so that the people could put it on the candles above it with Mary there. And then they'd wave their smoky things over the seed, making sure it was blessed, So we had to adhere to their traditions, or we would be probably shunned, So it's kind of fun trying to work with their traditions, to be right honest.
Yeah.
Now I'm working over in Sinahu, which is LDS communities, and those traditions are no longer there. So it's really fun working with them, because then we can move ahead and do the things really the way I think it ought to be done, rather than trying to be held up by tradition. It's really been a fun experience.
You're talking about some of the trips you've been on to help with farming and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I've been in about 20 countries, a lot of the developing countries, trying to help them overcome their poverty and their starvation situations. Been quite a ride.
Yeah. Okay.
And I spent several months in the Sahara trying to help them rehabilitate a multi-million-dollar failure in that big canal, and they just couldn't raise the crops. So I went over there and helped them on that, and I think I helped a little bit. But as far as I can tell, it's still pretty much of a failure. There's some things that they can't overcome, but there's parts that we were able to overcome the problem.
Okay. All right. Well, tell us more about Yucatan. Why that's a good place for Book of Mormon lands.
Well, we could spend days and maybe months going over all the stuff that we've put together. We do a worksheet on every location, where we look at all the scriptural references to that location, and we look at all the other things that may apply. And so we just dig really deep in our model to make sure everything is taken into consideration. And it really gives in order for us to decide with a high level of confidence, it has to be a city that has the date right, the location right in relationship to other sites, the triangulation. It has to have the size that you'd expect on a Book of Mormon site, and then there's also usually something else will fall out that will make it look like it's for real. But those three things we will classify it as highly likely.
Okay.
If or highly, yeah. So I think we've been very thorough. I don't know if anybody else is. And the thing that's so neat about our is everything is predictable. Well, if a city's here and another city's here, then there should be a city here. Well, you go there's the city. You're not putting cities in just blank places so it'll meet a map requirement. There's got to be an actual site that meets those requirements, or it'll fail on our criteria. And I find that to be a thorough way of looking at it.
Let me ask you this. I was talking with Jerry Grover. Are you familiar with him? So he's a geologist. He wrote a book called Geology of the Book of Mormon. And I've asked him specifically about, it seems like Heartland and Meso are kind of the top two. And there's a bunch of other theories, Yucatan and Baja and some other ones. But one of the things that he said, when there's the destruction in 3rd Nephi, he feels like you need to have some fault lines in your map that explain the destruction of different cities. And, it talks about the mists of darkness and the sounds and the quakings, and, it was so dark they couldn't even light fire, which, the Hebrews didn't have a word for volcanoes, but he says it really sounds a lot like volcanoes. But one of the things that was surprising to me that he said, and I was just listening to it this morning because I wanted to make sure, was he said, kind of Guatemala, Mesoamerica, you've got volcanoes that fit that pretty well, but he said seismically, the Yucatan Peninsula there's the fewest faults. He says it's the most seismically sound place. And so how would you describe the destructions of those cities?
Well, if you're the Polo Cheek fault line runs right through the line between Zarahemla and Nephi, land of Nephi and land of Zarahemla. And there is a lot of evidence of earthquake damage, and landslides that's caused by seismic activity there. And that's going on today even. But it appears like if you want to look at the map and see a major landslide where La Tinta is built on today, I think that is the place where possibly Mokum or Anahaiha, could be covered up. We think we know where Jerusalem was carried it because of a major landslide, and that's right on the fault line. So anyway, and then there's in Aguateca, which is where I think the land of Milik is, a very defensive type place for the people of Ammon. And that's just directly west of Zarahemla. There's a huge crack in the earth there, huge crack. When that happened, I don't know. But it's amazing. I don't think you find anything like that anywhere in the Mesoamerica. So somewhere there has been some seismic activity. So, but we do have the volcanoes. There's no other country that has volcanoes like Guatemala, and so that part of it is pretty active.
But are there volcanoes on the Yucatan? Because it sounds like on the southern end there are, but not so much on the northern end.
Yeah. But if you have several volcanoes going off at the same time, that can really carry a few miles away. So part of there's no doubt that part of the Book of Mormon of my model would be impacted that in a very big way.
But would it impact the correct cities? That's what Jerry would say. I'm channeling Jerry Grover here.
Yeah. Well, it would impact some of them, but I don't know. I'd have to study. I would think that those eruptions would be much more severe than normal. They could be.
Okay.
And so then if that's the case, then what would happen? What does that immediately mean in terms of how far it carries,
And how far is St. Helens?
Yeah. So, so I don't know. I think that that's a good question.
Okay.
But I do think we're much more in a position to have that happen than the Heartlanders.
Yeah, the Heartlanders will like say that, well, doesn't say the word volcano in there in the Book of Mormon, and so but still, I mean, okay, good point, but how do you explain the mists of darkness?
Yeah.
Because an earthquake isn't just going to create mists of darkness.
Yeah, but volcanoes that go off and everything, was in my view, when trying to read that's like you had a perfect storm, volcanoes and earthquakes.
Well, and Jerry's point is, if you go back to Mount St. Helens, I mean, the immediate area around there, it was dark. It was at noon and it looked like it was pitch black. But that's a relatively small area. The cloud, granted, the dust cloud is going to go up, maybe up to the Yucatan Peninsula, let's say, but is it going to create those conditions that far away? Probably not.
I've thought about that. I haven't totally.
Yeah.
But I thought, well, that was an unusual event, and unusual things happen.
Because the volcano is going to be really important nearby where the volcano is, like Pompeii or wherever. It's going to be catastrophic. But farther away where those cities needs to be, it's probably, it'll affect the weather or whatever, but it's not going to block out the sun as much.
Mm-hmm. It's, it's the other thing that if it was, if you went to the land of Nephi, I think it's very probable that you'd get, if you had several of them went off at the same time. We're just really speculating here, but they'd be definitely affected in my mind. But you go over the narrow strip of wilderness, then that becomes less. So who knows where they were referring to? Who knows? Was it which area of the Book of Mormon lands was that impacting? Was it all of the Book of Mormon lands, or just a part of the Book of Mormon lands?
Yeah.
Because I think we can definitely say that part of the Book of Mormon lands was affected that way.
Yeah, and Jerry seems to say, well, you got to make sure if you say this city is destroyed, is there a volcano nearby or whatever? And he didn't seem to think that was the case with Yucatan, but.
I'd like to talk to him.
Yeah, definitely. I'll put you in contact with him.
Yeah, we need to look at all sides of that.
Because I don't know, one of my favorite theories is the Malay theory. Have you heard about that?
No.
It's a peninsula, basically Malaysia. Yeah. So, number one, you're going to be like, well, that's kind of far-fetched. But it has the seismic activity. It's got gold. It's got silver. It's got, it's been inhabited the whole time. Thailand means land of the free, apparently. Land of liberty.
There's some traditions in Thailand that are pretty interesting.
Yeah. So if you ignore where it is, it fits the Book of Mormon really well.
Well, actually, Burma, there's a lot of tradition out of there.
Yeah.
Makes you stop and think.
Well, that's right there on the Malay Peninsula, right? Yeah. So, but but then this kind of gets into where because I've asked them the same. Well, I haven't because the guy who wrote it died. But the hardest question is the two Cumorah theory, which Heartlanders, they eat that for lunch because they're like, there's only one Cumorah, it's in New York.
Yeah.
But because the question is, well, how did they get the plates from Malay to New York, or Yucatan from New York, or Meso to New York? That's a tough answer if you say that it was a limited geography. You did say he can go anywhere in 40 years. Well, that's what the Malay people say. And why, if it's doing it for 40 years, why isn't he writing something down,
Well, he did for a while, He did for a while.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, he ran out of ore, and then he found some more ore, and then he started writing again. But I think at least the last 10 years, I don't think he wrote much,
Do we have record of, like, gold plates or copper plates or any kind of plates in Yucatan?
Well, I went through a museum in Merida, that's on the northern part, and they had a lot of metal, different kinds of metal.
Mostly copper kind of stuff?
Yeah, it seemed like there was a variety of metal. I was having a hard time deciphering that. I couldn't find anybody that I could ask, but there was different kinds of metal there. That was, especially in the Guatemala, in the middle of Guatemala, there's lots of metals, different metals.
I mean, I'm going to play the role of critic here for just a minute, because the Lamoni, sons of Lamoni, they buried their weapons of war and they rested. And I know that's been one of the big knocks against Mezzo but I think it's a similar knock against Yucatan probably, because you guys are pretty kind of in the same area. I do like the north-south orientation, but anyway, they had these clubs that had a bunch of flint, and they were basically wooden clubs with a bunch of very sharp flint. Well, flint doesn't rust. I'm sure it's deadly. I'm sure it would cause a lot of damage, but it's not really a sword, and so you really kind of playing semantics with the things.
Well, the fact that they had in the museum they're displaying medals up there to me was quite.
But did they have like steel? Because it says steel swords.
Yeah, steel type. Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, because I've asked this about Baja too. They didn't really use. Even ore in South America was used for paint, like face paint and things like that. It wasn't really used to make metal plates or steel swords. Do you see that as a weakness with either Yucatan or Mezzo?
Oh, yeah. I don't know. There was an awful lot of gold and a lot of stuff there when the Spaniards arrived.
Well, they kept saying, if you go to the next town, there's some gold. Well, they never found any gold. It was always the next town. Okay. Go check out the next town.
Yeah, I don't know. There's quite Kirk Magleby in his site has a lot on metals. And if you want to read something that's very extensive on the metal, it's pretty impressive.
Well, and I'm going to play Book of Mormon critic here once again here for a minute, because the gold plates are pretty unique. I talked to Brent Gardner about this, because you will find like the copper scroll with the Dead Sea Scroll, but it's really small. It's just a small scroll. It's not like a 500-page book. Like that has never really, you can find some little small writing on some copper here and there, but it's usually like a personal thing, almost like you'd wear it as a necklace kind of a thing. Not like a 300 or 500-page Book of Mormon. That's never been found anywhere. And so a critic of the Book of Mormon is going to say, where's the plates?
Well, you go into that museum in Guatemala City, and there's some boxes there. There's some boxes there that are portrayed as as storage for metal plates. That's how they portray it. Mm-hmm. They may be after LDS visitors to get them excited. I don't know, but there's some interesting stuff there in that regard.
Because I've heard that happens a lot. Oh, you're Mormon? Yeah. We'll give you the Mormon tour.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
Because I went to Lamani, and we even heard there was like, well, this is like a baptismal font. I'm like, yeah, is that true? Is that really true? Or are you just playing up to the Mormons?
You were on a Back of Mormon tour?
It wasn't a Book of Mormon tour. We went to Tulum and Lamani. We went to Lamani in Belize, and I thought that was a lot of fun. But it's hard.
Hill Cumorah, and my Hill Cumorah is only 10 miles north of Lamani.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So that to me, that whole area there where the Hutterites are would be the Nephite land where they had villages and cities and things.
Well, I think Belize is great. Belize, you need to hire me to be on your tourist board.
So it talks about the choice land above all others, a promised land. boy, I tell you, that's a promised land, I think. I mean, there's some beautiful, just tropical and beautiful cattle ranches.
I would have picked Hawaii. That's my promised land.
Okay. Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Bob Roylance, author of the Yucatan Peninsula theory of the Book of Mormon. In our next conversation, I'm going to ask him a tough question. DNA.
I don't want to talk any more about DNA.
Well, you were going to say something about that. BYU.
Off the record.
Off the record? No, we're on camera here.
Yeah, I won't get my BYU friends in trouble. So.
Okay. If you'd like to hear the entire interview uncut, subscribe on either Patreon or at gospeltangents.com. For just $5 a month, you can hear the entire audio uninterrupted. On our $10 tier, if you would like to see the whole video, you can see that either on youtube.com/gospeltangents, or I've got a special Facebook group devoted for full videos. So subscribe at gospeltangents.com and sign up for just $10 a month. For $20 a month, if you'd like to get some bonus content, maybe some of the stuff that ended up on the cutting room floor, you can sign up for that. And then if you'd like to talk to me for $100 a month, we'll do a monthly phone call on something like Zoom, and you can ask me anything you want. So thanks again. Also, don't forget about the merch, mugs, t-shirts, hats, things like that. I'm trying to get the ties up there. Hopefully I can get up there. And thanks again for watching Gospel Tangents, and click here for some more videos.